Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Jess Telemontes. I'm the Mayor of Burbank, and I'm also one of the representatives on the COG. And last month I was appointed to be a COG's representative to the Transportation Committee of SCAG. So we, along with Mr. Scott, myself, Mr. Herman, Mr. Krisky, we decided to get some, how do we get this started? Obviously by a meeting, right? Have another meeting. So here we are. But the reason this is, in my opinion, is the fact that we're trying to get some input, obviously, so I can take back to SCAG and just represent the COG, our interest, obviously, since we have the newly formed COG. We're going to do a lot of good things, I believe, not only in the near future, but in the far future. We're going to, with his leadership, Mr. Scott's leadership, we're going to do a lot of great things for the San Fernando Valley in general. So there's a lot of common interests, even though we're separate cities, the different entities, but I think we have lots of common interests that we can benefit the entire region with. So why don't we go ahead and everybody introduce themselves, and then we can get started.
John Bagdinian, Traffic Transportation Administrator, City of Glendale.
I'm Jonathan Feline, I'm the Assistant to the City Manager in the City of Glendale.
Good afternoon, Ann Kerman. I'm with Metro Community Relations for this region.
I'm Alan Rifkin. I'm with the Orange Line Development Authority, and also working with the...
Not to be confused with our Valley Orange Line.
Correct.
Just so everybody knows.
I'm Mark Hardiman, Director of Environmental Programs for Bob Hope Airport.
I'm Lucy Bergdorf. I'm the Public Relations and Government Affairs Manager for the Burbank Bob Hope Airport, but I also sit on the City of Burbank's Transportation Commission.
Just Alontis.
Don Spalding, Executive Officer for Regional Rail LA Metro.
Mike Howard, Urban Innovations. We consult to the City of Santa Clarita, the Transit Authority, the developer, putting together a plan for the building of the new train station, Metro train station, and then the development around it.
I'm Bob Scott, Executive Director of the San Fernando Valley Council of Governments, also serving the Valley of Santa Clarita.
I'm Mitch Morrison. I'm for lending staff support services to the Executive Director.
I'm Mike Parker with the Santa Clarita City Manager's Office.
Victor Lindenheim, Golden State Gateway Coalition. We're advocates for improving Interstate 5 in our county, and we're based in Santa Clarita.
And I'm Marcia McLean, Councilwoman for the City of Santa Clarita, and I am on the Transportation Committee of SCAG, and representing the North County on that committee.
Great, we'll see you.
And I'm also the alternate for the COG.
Over here.
Sir?
Sir?
Hi, I'm Donald Wilkes. I'm with Los Angeles Unified School District. I'm the Director of Transportation.
I'm Astrid Logan. I'm the Transportation Coordinator for Cal State Northridge.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ryan Clough with SCAG, Regional Transportation Planner.
I'm Steve Fox with SCAG, Regional Transportation Planner.
Jerry Martin, Railback.
David Krisky, Deputy City Planner for Transportation, City of Burbank.
Mark Everhart, National Association of Railroad Passengers.
And Paul Dyson, I'm Chairman of the Transportation Commission for the City of Burbank, and I'm the President of the Rail Passengers Association of California.
Well, welcome. Mr. Scott, would you like to say?
Yeah, we've only been in existence for about a year. We've only been really somewhat organized for about 9 months, I guess, since we started putting things together. This is our first actual official, I'm not supposed to call it official, it's informal, but it's kind of official committee meeting. The idea here being that one of the things we identified for the role of councils of government throughout this area, the strongest roles we play is that of transportation. Cross-jurisdictional, interagency, there's probably nothing that creates more of a tangled web than transportation funding and transportation planning. And so the idea that Mayor Telemontes is willing to take on the chairmanship of this committee is a great thrill. He's a creative person who's got a lot of great ideas, it seems. And I think that we may have, at least in my personal opinion, I think we may have missed out on a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of missed opportunities over the last literally 100 years that to some extent we need to go back and take a look at what needs to be done. It's funny, as I was on my way over here today, I was thinking about doing this map that if you could have your wish list of transportation connections, where would you put them? One of the issues, of course, has always been, whether it's practical or not, getting off of the 134 onto the 5 and being able to travel northward without having to get off the freeway and then get back on another freeway. I've been informed that's not possible, but of course anything, if you put your mind to it, probably is possible. That's one small thing that's very close, near and dear to our hearts, right here where we are. The other thing that we've looked at for a long time, and I've personally been involved with in my activism in the San Fernando Valley, has been I would say, a shortchanging a little bit return on investment to the San Fernando, Santa Clarita Valley, anything north of Mullen Drive has generally come up a little bit short in the allocation for transportation. It's sort of like rail light is the orange line. It's not exactly rail, but if you talk to the folks at the Reason Public Policy Institute, they'll tell you that we lucked out because it's even better than rail because it's rubber tires. I mean, there are these conversations. I would argue that because it's so successful, maybe it would be nice to have some grade separation, have some express buses that would really make it something that discretionary riders would be interested in getting involved in. I look at things, and this might startle a few people, like the tunnel between here and Santa Clarita. It's old, it's rickety, nothing can go very quickly through there. It doesn't accommodate the larger freight vehicles, cars. There are needs, as I understand it, to make that at least double track it, to make it higher, and make it something that could amount to an Alameda corridor north, kind of a connection to the Antelope Valley corridor that ultimately would allow us to go out and work in a better partnership with Antelope Valley, looking at things like foreign trade zones, looking at things like inland ports, and then try to make some better connections with some of the other areas, because that is, after all, what transportation is. It's unfortunate, apparently, I was talking to one of my train riding friends the other day, and he was mentioning that in order to get to San Francisco, you've got to take I don't know if this is true or not, you've got to take a bus to Bakersfield. That's correct. That sort of takes a fun of the trip. So, those are the kind of things we need to look at. I find that most of the people in this area don't even know what the Lausanne corridor is, and probably are a little surprised to find out there's even an organization called the Orange Line Development Authority. So I'm thinking there's a lot more communication that we could engage in, and there are some more things that we could do to make all the transportation more useful, because any chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and we have an awful lot of weak links in this chain. So I'll save my other comments for after we've heard Mr. Sepulveda speak, but those are some initial takes that I have, and of course that's just one person's opinion.
And yes, and it is your opinion, you're sticking to it.
You asked.
Did everybody get an agenda?
Yes.
Okay, good. Mr. Sepulveda, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to kind of be up here, and some of you have seen some of this stuff before, but I'm going to treat it all as new. First of all, I got to get a plug in for something I don't normally get to say because we don't hear it that often. Go Matadors!
Yeah, CSUN.
We made it to the final 64 a few years ago. But don't talk about our football team. We used to have one. I am Don Sepulveda. I actually, to give you a little bit, I really wanted to tell you a little bit about my background. I've got a railroad background, and I've worked with many of you in different capacities, one way, shape, or form, in different aspects over the years. I came from the consulting side to Metro at the end of March of last year, and since then I've been, getting my feet wet in public service and really enjoying what I'm doing. I'm having more fun, really, than if somebody had told me this, that I was going to have this much fun when I started this job. I'd have said you're smoking something, but it's been a blast, and you're going to hear more about that whole rail thing. In Los Angeles County, one of the problems that we have had is we really have not had a consolidated strategic rail plan. We've had our light rail plan, we've had our bus plan and transit plan, but when I talk about rail and my stuff, I'm not talking about transit. Transit is completely different than intercity, commuter, and high-speed rail. So when you work in that context, you'll understand where I'm going with this. I'm a strategic thinking guy. You can't even go to the grocery store without a plan. When you go to the grocery store without a plan, you come home with gumdrops instead of diapers. So that's kind of where I'm at. So if you have any questions, just jump in, please. So what is regional rail? It is Metrolink, it's Amtrak Intercity, it's goods movement, it's the Los San I-5 corridor, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a moment, and of course the ever popular California High-Speed Rail project. And so we essentially deal with, my team deals with anything that rolls in steel wheels in LA County that Metro does not operate. So that's kind of the easy way out on that one. And yes, we prefer steel to rubber tires, by the way. It's more efficient. So what do? We actually coordinate with the with Metrolink, Amtrak, and the freight carriers in LA County on railroad activities, especially since we are member agencies of Metrolink. We're the major member agency of Metrolink, where we pay 47 to 49% of their operational subsidy. We're also a member agency of the Los San Corridor JPA, and one of the largest member agencies of that one as well. We work with high-speed rail to bring high-speed rail to California, to Los Angeles County in a sane way, and I've got to stress sane way. High-speed rail has had the dubious distinction of walking into cities up and down the state of California and saying, we're from the railroad, we're here to help. And it may have worked 150 years ago, but it doesn't work today. So, also, we manage the right-of-way that these carriers operate on that's owned by Metro. So, at a quick glance, these are our inner-city corridors, and the red dot is what you'll hear me refer to as Rome. All roads lead to Rome, that's Union Station. And you'll see all of the yellow in the background. The yellow is right-of-way owned by Metro that either has transit on it or will be getting transit. The important thing to consider is that when you look at these transit connections in concert with the regional rail connections, it tells you that it's all about regional connectivity. It all blends together. It's not either or, it's usually a combination of both. Somebody comes from San Bernardino on a Metrolink train and then gets to Union Station and then takes a red line to go to work in downtown Los Angeles. So it's very important. And also you'll see up to the top there, you'll see a purple line going out to Antelope Valley. That's the high-speed rail route. And again, you'll notice that it's all right there. High-speed rail corridors. These are the planned high-speed rail corridors as of right now. And I say that as of right now because nothing is really final yet. Some of the ones that are having the big challenges, we've got some segments in the LA to Palmdale segment that's got some environmental challenges we'd have to work through. Same thing going to the Inland Empire. Throughout there we've got some challenges. Anaheim to LA, we've resolved many of the environmental challenges, but we're going to have somewhat of a different vision for high-speed rail there than was actually originally planned. But you'll actually notice, if you look at that very closely, I'm going to take you back one step. Notice that many of those high-speed rail corridors are the existing Metrolink corridors. And that's important as we get further along, and I talk about a couple of other things. So the greatest high-speed rail news, here's up to date. Of course, you know the business plan. We've heard all about the business plan. It was released on November 1st. Comments were supposed to have been received by the 16th of January. They did receive a lot of comments. They're going to be doing some significant work on this. And we've been working really closely with high-speed rail on this business plan, particularly Chapter 2, the blended approach. Some of our sister and brother our transportation agencies up and down California have been meeting with them. We've been going up to Sacramento and working with them on these plans to try and develop a means to fix the problem. And it's a different high-speed rail than it used to be. I refer to myself as being cautiously optimistic to them because it seems that they're on the right track. One of the things that is really key to high-speed rail is they have to start thinking of themselves as part of the transportation system of California, not just as a high-speed rail system. They're part of that regional rail network. And as part of that, they have to bridge the gap. They have to give us a one-seat train ride between Los Angeles and the Bay Area that is not a bus. And that is a significant problem that we have. So they have also recommended not to move forward with the I-5 Grapevine, so the high-speed alignment will go through Palmdale as a station. That's very important for us at Metro. They've had a change of leadership. The executive officer has resigned, gave basically his 2-month notice. The chair has stepped down. He'll remain on the board, but he has stepped down. Dan Richard will probably be assuming the leadership of the authority board. I'll find out for sure on Thursday. Dan is a refreshing light. The governor appointed 2 new high-speed rail board members, Mike Rossi and Dan Richard. And both of those guys have taken a very strong ownership role in the program and have been beating basically the governor's drum up and down the state of California to try and work out the issues that are going with this business plan. They did have a peer review report. It was very critical. Of course, the leader of the peer review has been called to the mat by several people, and they're giving it off. They're working out some of their challenges with the high-speed rail folks, and that'll stay tuned on that. So as a quickie to run through, the costs have been modified on the business plan. You've heard about the escalating costs. They have been increased with advanced engineering. They've also been increased to account for inflation, which they didn't have accounted for before. It phases the project, which it didn't do before. Before, it actually planned, if you notice, the high-speed rail program was basically planned to build the whole thing and then throw a light switch and voila, we have it. That's not reality. We've never built anything that 600 miles that way. You know, it's great if you think about an Expo line or an Orange line as building a segment and then flowing it on. But you can't do that with high-speed rail. So they're a little bit more reasonable in their ideas. And they've also phased it with some reasonable funding options, which is important in these times. And of course, one of the big things for a lot of people is they actually have reduced their ridership numbers and have made them more conservative. Our official position has been that we support the work on their blended approach. It's an important step, and as part of that blended approach, it actually calls for some investment in other transportation systems. We believe the initial construction segment that they've identified out in the San Joaquin Valley is only effective when it connects to the existing intercity systems, and we believe it actually needs to connect to Palmdale to complete the statewide intercity system. If we get a train from Bakersfield to Palmdale, then we can get trains up to Palmdale to bridge that. And we can actually have the opportunity for a one-seat ride from the Bay Area into Los Angeles if that happens. And since Metro owns the right-of-way, that's fairly simple once we get the trains there. We need them to show independent utility by meeting the needs of California. And meeting the needs of California is not having a rail line that's just independent, just a segment of rail line where you can go a couple of miles an hour faster. What we believe is that it should connect and should provide additional transportation options for California. And probably the big thing for us is there must be concurrent investment in the north and south. We believe that the ICS, you can build that initial construction segment, but you have to show value to the voters of California by building in the Bay Area and building in Southern California. And you're going to hear me talk about that right now. Advanced investment. We are working to partner with high-speed rail to develop projects in LA that actually benefit the existing rail systems as well as the future system. A particular example is the grade separations. A grade separation of the Metrolink corridor down here along San Fernando Road would benefit Metrolink initially. It would benefit the commuters of the area, but it would also provide an avenue for high-speed rail in the future. One such is Doran Street. As you know, Doran Street is probably poster child for unsafe conditions at a crossing with a propane facility right adjacent to it. And poor John has been on the receiving end of a whole lot of stuff on this one. We have Metro actually put a board motion to put $6.6 million into improving the crossing. One of the things that we have done is we've taken that and leveraged that to get a $32 million grant from ARA to fund a complete grade separation. And so this is something that is moving forward rather quickly. It looks like it's a done deal. We still got to get the final word, but it looks like it's going pretty well. And John, we need to set up a little conference between you and Jaime and myself, and we need to talk about this.
Anytime we bring money,
we're getting money. We're getting money. I've been told to write the RFP for this. Okay. Also, we believe capacity improvements that support it, and that would be like, for example, in the San Fernando Valley, it's a single track from Buena Vista all the way up to Silmar. If that was a double track, it would solve a lot of problems. So these are things we're looking at, and probably it's just as important as if you look at Prop 1A, it wasn't $10 billion, it was $9.95 billion. $950 million was allocated for local transportation agencies for regional connectivity projects. Metro was given, I think, about $115 million out of that, and we've allocated that money for the regional connector. And one of the problems that we're having is the CTC keeps putting this forward, the governors have kept vetoing it. So high-speed rail, the authority's committed to providing some help in getting these things moved forward. But all of this work has led to this SCAG MOU that many of you have heard about. And this is an MOU between SCAG, the high-speed rail folks, and the other agencies in Southern California. And we're actually writing this MOU and seeking $1 billion in advance investment in Southern California. I wish I could say LA County. I wish I could even say the San Fernando Valley. I can't. It's $1 billion in Southern California. Well, when you think of what we can do with $1 billion in Southern California, think a grade separation, about $40 million. Okay, so if we start doing the math, what we can do for grade crossing safety in LA, what we can do for capacity, what we can do for all kinds of different things. So it's exciting to think about that between now and 2020, we can be very busy people. It's a good problem to have. We're going to be prioritizing these projects, this funding for these projects in accordance with performance criteria. We actually have a project list that's over $3 billion. Some of them will get it and some of them won't. It's going to have to fall into a prioritization. What's probably very interesting about this whole thing is all of these agencies have gotten together to work on this MOU. We generated this MOU, and Steve, I don't know, was it a matter of weeks? We were able to put together
late November, then with the holidays.
Yeah, we were able to put together an MOU between 8 agencies that actually made sense for everybody. It might have to do some, little fine tuning once the attorneys get it, because you know how attorneys are. But we've got a thought process that's created some synergy with all of these agencies that is exciting to see. So Metro approved the MOU last week at their board meeting. It's going to the other boards in the coming weeks. This is coming out. Now, if you look at this little map, and the circles are more or less representative. Now, I wouldn't say that each circle represents a project, but the general location of projects. But you can see some of the items that I've put down in our list and some of our folks have put down in the list. We've got some projects out towards the San Gabriel Valley, projects down towards Anaheim on the low sand corridor, projects up the San Fernando Road. We've got a double track project up in your Santa Clarita area. And so we've got projects all over the place here. We'll see how successful some of them are. Some of them would be more successful than others, of course. And of course, again, the red dot is Union Station. And in Metrolink, you saw this thing before. I won't go any further or very much further on that. But know where Bob Hope Airport is. That's pretty important when you think about it. Bob Hope is, and Mark sent a great article. Of course, I still haven't been able to open that thing up. The Bob Hope, for the longest time, was the only commuter or airport that was on a commuter line, railroad line, if you can believe that. Some of them have light rail, some of them have other things, but a commuter light rail line was rare in the United States. A few years ago, Billy Mitchell opened up a commuter line or a station on the commuter route. Billy Mitchell Field's in Milwaukee, and they require a shuttle. But Bob Hope Airport's got this unique place right in the crux of Metrolink there to provide some great transportation options. And they have a station on that one line, what we call the Ventura line. So it's an important thing to think about when you start thinking about regional connectivity. We do have a $51 million annual work plan with Metrolink. That's just our portion. We work with Metrolink on capital projects throughout California. We've worked with them on a lot of grade crossing issues, some siting projects. We're starting to work with them on strategic studies, something that hadn't been done before. And there's a lot of improvements going on at Union Station now, and there will be over the next couple of years, and we're working closely with Metrolink to make those happen. And I did want to talk with you specifically about the Antelope Valley line. The Antelope Valley line is the true line that's completely in Los Angeles County. It runs actually from Los Angeles Union Station all the way out to Palmdale. This line is, it's very important to us. It's the third busiest line in the Metrolink system. It has about 5,800 daily riders. Problem is, it's about 2 hours to travel from Palmdale to Union Station. It's not real beneficial for commuters. And if you're traveling really early, quite frankly, it's actually quicker to take a car. And the problem is that when you look at it, it's a series of hairpin turns. The track geometry is actually limiting the speed. It's an old 150-year-old or 100-year-old freight route. It's just not conducive to quick commuter times. So, but the key is segments of the AVL are actually on the high-speed rail corridor and the low-sand corridors, which opens them up for funding possibilities that are interesting. As a matter of fact, the segment of the Antelope Valley line south of Burbank Boulevard gets about 89 trains a day between freight and Metrolink and Amtrak. Pretty significant. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce those travel times to an hour. And and I'll speak frankly, we're having troubles doing that. When we get off that corridor, we tend to get into some real environmental problems. So we may as well go to the high-speed rail route to do that. It's getting real crazy. We're looking at enhanced safety, some grade crossing work. You know, we're looking at prioritizing some grade separation options through there. We're looking at some siding projects that would actually build capacity into the line. And in many of these things, for example, the siding projects, they will may not build into the alignment speed per se, but they'll build into the line some efficiencies that aren't there now. For example, a train coming in the morning, the one train that I get at 6:20 on Santa Clarita, and I can never remember the train number, it stops and holds for 10 minutes at Tuxford. And the only reason for that is there's another train heading north. So if we had some more efficient trackage in there, we could save that 10 minutes. That's pretty significant when we start thinking train rides. So it's going to be a fun challenge as we start moving forward. I've seen some of the things that we've seen, and some of the efficiencies are hard to model because we're modeling this at the same time. But the collateral effects are nice. Of course, we're going to strategize over our prioritization. This is a complete strategic plan for this line. It's going to identify how we can do things. What's the low-hanging fruit? Where can we go next? What's the long term? And how can we implement this? We have begun, the consultant is on board, of course, but probably one of the more important issues on this is as part of this project, we're actually studying the possible station at Hollywood Way. And what this would do is this would provide another link to Bob Hope Airport on another rail line. So it essentially brackets the airport. The folks at Bob Hope Airport and Mark and his folks have been working with us on this pretty closely. We're going to actually be this part of that ground access study that they're going to be working on. So we've been working with their consultants on this. So this is it's an exciting prospect as we start looking forward. So to put it into context, imagine somebody in Palmdale needing to go to San Francisco. They actually take the train, Metrolink, down to a station at Hollywood Way. Bob Hope Airport's there with a shuttle to take them 5 minutes to their terminal. You just can't beat that. So that's kind of the idea. And when you expand that out and you think towards the future, when we finally bridge that gap between between Bakersfield and Palmdale, you can do from Bakersfield down to Bob Hope Airport and then fly out. So the prospects are great. Los San I-5 corridor. That is in pink. It actually runs from San Luis Obispo to San Diego. This is the Amtrak Pacific Surfliner route. There are 3 different passenger rail operators on this corridor. There's the Coaster in San Diego, there's Metrolink, and then there's Amtrak. Coincidentally, the most efficient ones are Coaster and Metrolink. Amtrak runs about 20% less in on-time performance than the other 2 over the same trackage. And of course, they blame other people. It's not their management at all. This is the second busiest commuter rail corridor in the country, next to the Northeast Corridor. So the future for this corridor is we are actually working with the other member agencies to develop local governance for the corridor. I don't know if you're familiar with the Capitol Corridor up in Northern California. It runs between the Bay Area and Sacramento. That is managed locally by a separate JPA to handle the day-to-day business of that corridor. Amtrak operates it. Caltrans funds it, the state funds it, but it is managed and administered by that local agency. And what that does is it takes the management of local rail out of the hands of somebody in Sacramento and somebody else in Washington, D.C. So what we've done is by doing this, we can take out those middlemen, I should say. It's not just a middleman, it's a middleman, because everybody's got to get their footprints on it. And it actually moves to put that locally. What this does is it increases the efficiencies, of course. In Capitol Corridor, they found that their cost per train mile actually dropped, or track mile dropped about, operating cost dropped about $20 a track mile when they did this, just because they got rid of the inefficiencies in the system. So that is moving forward. We've actually developed a government document that's moving forward. We identified some voting rights. We've identified the JPA. It's very close. Last Friday, we introduced a spot bill to go towards legislation to make this happen. So, and we are working on more on the key government concepts. We've got a long way to go. We've got a couple of agencies who are a little reluctant on this, so we've got to work hard to resolve some of these differences. And we've got to finalize this legislation, but it's very exciting when you start thinking about it. And this is something that is straight and home to us. I'm going to zip forward real quick. If you'll notice, see the circle there, that's the Raymond or Burnson area on the San Fernando Ventura Valley line. Right now it's a single track area. That is a significant bottleneck, not just in the Los Angeles corridor, but in the Metrolink system. So Metro applied for and received an ARA grant to actually do preliminary engineering and environmental work to double track that segment. This will give us double track from the Ventura County line all the way through to to the Orange County line on the Los Angeles corridor. Significant for Los Angeles. We are actually this is going to kick off at any moment now. I signed the funding agreements for this thing actually 2 weeks ago, so we're right on track. We are expecting to be completed in February of 2013 with a little kick and prodding on the consultants, but that's the way we do it. I can do that since I'm a formal consultant. It's fun. There's actually a partner grant that we received as a second grant to redo Van Nuys Station. Right now, there are 2 tracks at Van Nuys Station, but a single platform for passenger rail operations. So this will actually look at what that entails to fix that. There's another little wrinkle in this as well, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this or not, but somebody traveling from bus on Van Nuys Boulevard does not have a really good connection with the Van Nuys station. They stop about a block away, they walk up the gauntlet of stairs, which I would be afraid to walk up myself in broad daylight, much less anybody else. So we need to look at that and figure out a different way to get some circulation going in there and make that work better. And that's important, because if you don't make it inviting, they won't come, and we need them to come. Again, the same thing with this. We're partnering with Metrolink on this, and it has the same criteria as the other one. It's going to be quick. So our next steps is we actually are developing plans for strategic studies on other rail lines in LA County. The San Bernardino line is the busiest in the LA County system, or the Metrolink system, excuse me. There's over 12,000 riders a day on the San Bernardino line between Union Station and San Bernardino. This line, actually, we own it jointly with the San Bernardino folks. We actually own it to the county line, and they own it from their county, within their county. We're going to be partnering with them on the next strategic study for this. Metrolink is a system. It's not a series of member agencies doing their own little thing and operating their own little railroads. It's a system, And all of us member agencies have to work together to complete the system and make sure that the system works, not just how it works in our county. Yeah, we've got to be a little parochial sometimes on our county, but it's all about the system. So I'm partnering with my counterpart in San Bernardino, trying to work out how this study is going to go forward. We'll have the same thing. We'll have a consultant doing the study. We'll have somebody modeling the effects to show what we get out of it. And this is going to move forward quicker than we think sometimes. Working to bring high-speed rail, we still need to do a lot of work to bring high-speed rail to Southern California. We have a lot of people that are very upset at the high-speed rail authority, very upset. They have not played nice. And just today, I sent forward a letter asking, what their response is to this letter. Not from me, but it was one of our constituent cities that actually had a letter they sent to them, and they didn't get a response. And the letter specifically pointed out some things that they didn't like. 3 months later, they see these things in their documents. So they feel that they're being ignored. Santa Clarita felt like you were being ignored.
Field, present tense.
Yeah. So there's a lot of this going on, and it's my team's responsibility to try and create that synergy that we really need on this thing to make it work. It's a beneficial project. We just got to do it right. We do need some grade separation, grade crossing programs, safety programs in Los Angeles. We don't have that. Orange County just went through their their OCX project, where they went through and upgraded 50 grade crossings in their city, or their county. They also have a comprehensive grade separation program and prioritization program. We don't have that in LA. We're going to get it, but it isn't there now, so we've got to move towards that. Another thing that we have is we need to start looking at other projects in the county. One of my assistant was actually out with the FTA doing station analysis last week for ADA compliance. Actually, I think this station, the Burbank station, was one of those that was actually looked at, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And she has pointed out some things to me, but one of the things we're finding with our Metrolink stations is that many of them haven't been upgraded for 20 years, since Metrolink actually had come into being. And we have stations like the downtown Burbank station, the Santa Clarita station. These are great stations. They're not perfect. Nothing really is. But they're not perfect yet, but they're there. These stations are much better than some of these other stations that you see where pavement is bad at the edge of the station. There's rotted wood around there, and the pedestrian crossings have no signals. For every good station, there's something that's not so good. So we need to do a comprehensive analysis of our stations and work with the cities to try and get some fixes. So my team and I, we did a strategic study, or strategic planning exercise last year. And we came up with about 20 different projects and initiatives that are needed. Of course, we have to prioritize those because we just don't have that kind of time. But that's where we're going with this. So with that, I'll give you my phone number and my email if you have any questions. I could go on and on and on and on and on, but he said I only had 2 hours, so I had to cut it off. Yes, sir.
Can I just start off with a question? We, on the Antelope Valley Corridor Improvement Study, which is being done now, they talk about this 59-mile-an-hour magical grant funding program. When you talk about blended, and you talk about high speed, and we haven't talked a whole lot, or don't hear a whole lot about express, something between high speed, a lot of people maybe would enjoy going 300 miles an hour, 220 miles an hour. But I think a lot of people would be content with going consistent 60 or 70 miles an hour also. How much thought's been put into that? And let me add something else. I noticed, and I've had some people in the room who I won't point out, but who said, it's really great if it goes by and there's no station, but then if everybody has a station, you lose your speed factor. Could you just address those?
Let me start from the back first. The most efficient train system in the world is one that has no passengers. But that's not what we're trying to do here. We need to move passengers. So we have to think about that with station placement. this is one of the challenges that high-speed rail has as well. And if you look at their plan, you know, they've got stations shown all over the place. As a matter of fact, my high-speed rail map shows 3 on the Antelope Valley line, but they're not all going to be stations. There's probably going to be one of those stations in there. You're right. The more stations you have, the slower your times are because you're stopping at all these stations. There is a significant difference, though, between commuter rail and high-speed rail. High-speed, and the best way to explain the difference is think of bus as street to street, intersection to intersection. Think of light rail by about a mile to a mile. Think about commuter rail as a couple of miles, 3, 4, 5 miles apart. Think of high-speed rail as cities, okay? That's kind of the difference, and then when you start thinking about those magnitudes here. So when we talk about that, we can't put Metrolink as competing with high-speed rail because they serve completely different markets. Our challenges on the Antelope Valley line is not the fact that we don't want to go that fast. The problem is we just can't. When we get into the San Fernando Valley, we can go at about 80 miles an hour, 79 miles an hour. We could even go faster once we start upgrading the positive train control and start doing some more grade separations. But when we start going in the valley, or the canyon, what we call the canyon, between Santa Clarita and Palmdale, when we start straightening out some of these curves, we start impacting communities. And we start taking out these neighborhoods, and we start, we've got a curve that goes around a school or around a development. And when you want to straighten out that curve, you got to go across that. That's not conducive to what we're trying to do here. The problem that we're having, the challenge that we're having on the Antelope Valley line is that the amount of savings that we're getting by straightening out curves is not as much bang for the buck as we would like it to be unless we start getting off of the metro right-of-way and we start getting into the wetlands, and we start getting into other areas. And then we're starting to create some real environmental issues. So it becomes a point where, when do we flip it over and rely on high-speed rail to get us at speed through that canyon, and when do we don't? And I don't know the answer to that yet. But this is the challenge that we're having on this. The problem is that rail corridors, railroads like to be long and flat and straight. And back when they were designing a lot of these rail corridors, they really couldn't do that because the freight technology at the time when these things were designed didn't allow what we could do now. So we're having to adapt to that. And that's the challenges that we have. And I hope it's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, but it's the best way that I could explain to you what the challenges are with that. There is a break point where we get this. And to give you an idea how much of a difference it makes, when you have a 30-mile-an-hour curve in a canyon, the radius of that curve is proportional to the square of the velocity. All right? So when you start thinking about that, and start thinking about that curve that starts going up, the radius goes up as that velocity goes up, and it climbs exponentially. So that's our challenge. Did I get you?
Pretty good.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment on sort of a question? Paul Dyson again. I've been involved in passenger rail advocacy here since 1980, and particularly in the development of the Lausanne corridor. And with the advent of this particular body is one sort of request and one that I'd like to point out to Don particularly. Metro provides 2 members to the Lausanne board. Neither of those members lives along the corridor or in any way represents the cities along the corridor. And incidentally, it's sort of disappointing to see nobody here today from the West Valley. But this new board represents cities and the stations at Glendale, Bob Hope Airport, Van Nuys, and Chatsworth. That's 4 of the stations along the Lausanne corridor. And nobody represents them on the Lausanne board. So I would suggest that this group gets together and talks to the Metro board members and suggests that at the first opportunity that you actually have the chance to nominate somebody to serve on that board so that you get a stake in that. The Lausanne service, and I take issue with Don, it's not Amtrak's fault that the trains don't run on time. It's a fault of a lack of investment, and this finally, after 25 years this double tracking between Van Nuys and Chatsworth is going to take place. But it's projects like that that are needed to make these trains run on time. Since we bought in Metrolink, we just try to put a cord into a pint pot. You just can't run that many trains on a single track railway. So the second thing I'm asking this group to do is to lobby and campaign to get the $72 million, which is a very small sum of money by today's standards, $72 million to do the rebuilding at Van Nuys Station and the double tracking up to Chatsworth, which will have a very positive impact on the punctuality of all the trains in this corridor. And punctuality sells tickets. People won't take the train to work if they're worried that it's not going to get there on time. So we've got to improve this punctuality. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
So do you have a response to that as far as the membership on the?
Well, I believe that the LoSAN board is going to change in its makeup and in its overall mission. Right now, the LoSAN board is more of a policy type of board. You know, they're working towards trying to coordinate the passenger rail service in the on the corridor. So they don't, but they really don't have a lot. I guess the best way to put it is they just don't have teeth. Okay, they can write off letters and they can say, you know, you got to do this, and people go, yeah, we'll do this. But frankly, there's really nothing there to require it. So I think you're going to see a new direction for this board when this board is created. You're now going to have a board that has management responsibilities for the corridor. It includes on-time performance, that includes marketing. It's a lot of these things that the board's now going to have oversight over. It's going to be a different board. Our members, the members that we have on the board, one of which is a Metro board member, and they have been actually very, very good on the board, and I cannot say enough good about them. Whether they'll continue on, I don't know the answer to that. I do know that an alternate is from gateway cities, and that's along the corridor. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But I'll take it. I gotta mention something on another side. You're right, Paul. Capacity is where it's at, but I cannot understand where we have 3 railroads and 2 of them have on-time performance ratings in the 90%, and the one is in the 70s. That's a management issue.
Well, I'll give you Railroad 101 after this though, because you should know.
We're not going to do it back and forth. That's okay. But anyway, so there's definitely some improvements that can be had in this quarter due to management. Let's just leave it at that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, there's a lot more to talk about. Sure. Good start.
What we have next, and part of the reason for sort of jamming our schedule up as we have on this is that the SCAG RTP Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, try to say that without taking my breath, is up for comment in the comment period, 45 days. Ryan Close here from SCAG to present for us. Matt Horton is also here. I do want to mention that Victor Lindenheim was good enough to bring these documents, which you're all welcome to a copy of. I had asked him to bring out enough copies so that we could share them with everybody. We also have some of these folders for the RTP-SCS.
Oh, Bob, I brought some more of those.
Oh, good. Okay, so we have those. And just by way of background, you all know about AB 32. And we've all been dealing with and coming to grips with SB 375 and the Sustainable Community Strategy. And somewhere along the line, the state has seen fit to put upon local governments the responsibility for changing their planning around to try to come up with this so-called Sustainable Community Strategy, which may or may not be possible, but being the good troopers that we are, we're all attempting to comply with that. So part of what this is about is coming up with this plan. We've got until February 14, 15, comment on this?
Yes.
14? Yeah. So we've got until Valentine's Day to comment on this plan, and I'd ask you to come out and share with us so we would have some sort of inside information, be able to ask some questions, and prepare any sort of comments that we might want to make, either as a group or individually as municipalities. Ryan, thank you.
you, Bob. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the task force. Happy to be here today, giving an update on the draft regional transportation plan sustainable community strategy. We do have an acronym for it because it is so long, called the RTP-SCS. I realize the right side of this presentation is going to cut off, but it shouldn't be a problem because the Fernando Valley is on the west part of our region, but let's see how we do. If anything important gets cut off, feel free to refer to me. See, it's working. So, for starters, why did we develop the Regional Transportation Plan, the RTP and the SES? Well, according to federal law, this has been around for some time now, we're required to develop a transportation plan that looks at least 20 years out, looks at transportation projects, the operations and maintenance of our system into the long term. The plan has to be financially constrained. This is a big one because we can dream of all kinds of really great projects for the region, but the feds require us to keep this plan realistic. We can't identify a funding source for these projects that show that they will be in place by the time we say the project will be in place. They say you can't put it into the plan. Another big item for the feds is air quality conformity. We are given budgets for various pollutants, and we have to demonstrate via model runs that our regional transportation plan will stay within these emission budgets. New to this RTP is the SCS, which has come as a result of state law. SB 375, as I'm sure you're all aware, requires us to develop a sustainable community strategy with this and all future RTPs that addresses greenhouse gas emission reduction targets by the years 2020 and 2035. Aside from the regulatory requirements, this RTP SCS is something that we should be doing anyway. Our region is expected to grow. We're looking at 1.5, 1.6 million people by year, additional people in Valley County alone by the year 2035. You can see our Inland Empire County is also continuing to grow much quicker than the rest of the region. So we set out to develop this RTP SCS a couple of years ago, actually. Of course, it's gained a lot more attention in recent months, but we've been doing this for some time now, mainly because we could lock ourselves in a room and develop the RTP in a matter of a couple of weeks or possibly a month if we really had to. But if this is a plan that's developed by the agency, not by the region, well, there's a problem with that because the plan is for the region and all the implementing agencies are other stakeholders like Metro, like the other CTCs, and the local control, the land use control, lies with the locals. And so this just gives you an idea of how many meetings we've had, how many stakeholders we've met with over the last couple of years just to develop this RTP SCS. And you'll want to look in your plans into your handouts because the numbers that I'm referring to don't show up on his screen up here. But or you can believe me that they're big numbers. So at the end of the day, we released the draft RTP last December, and this RTP looks at three major factors. Mobility has traditionally been the main goal that we've been trying to achieve with RTPs in the past, getting people around faster. But this time, especially with SB 375, with our air quality challenges here in Southern California, we realized we had to basically take a three-pronged approach and look at all three of these factors equally, not just mobility, but also the economy. What can we do to help stimulate the economy and get Southern California back on its feet? Sustainability, this is the crux, this is the SB 375 of being able to plan Southern California in a more sustainable manner, integrating land use and transportation so that people don't have to drive long distances and so that we're not developing plans that simply get people faster the same amount of, so the same distance that you used to have to get to go to work. Hopefully we can have a greater balance in our land use decisions. And so what's in the plan? We've got over $525 billion in the plan in transportation improvements and strategies. This is in nominal dollars, so it's not in constant dollars. Out of the 525, about half of that is for capital investments. We've got almost another half for system operations and maintenance, and $45 billion of debt service so that we can construct a lot of these projects sooner rather than wait till we have all the money to then finally start building these projects and put them on the ground. Just to give you an idea of what some of the major modal investments we have in this RTP. On the highway side, we've got $72 billion for highway improvements and $22 billion for arterials. It's in a small box at the bottom, but we can't understate the importance of operations and maintenance in this region. And not we necessarily as a region, but this country has been underfunding operations and maintenance over the last few decades. And so you see I don't have those numbers with me here today, but a great number of our roadways and bridges in this region have fallen to a state of disrepair. And so this RTP allocates $57 billion for highway O&M and $21 billion for arterial O&M to get our roadway and highway system up into a state of good repair by the year 2035. And these are numbers that were approved by our regional council. Just to give you an idea of what we've got going on in this region, San Fernando Valley's got a very well-developed network of highways and arterials already. As Bob mentioned before, there are operational improvements. There are plenty of operational improvements like the I-5, I-30, 134 interchange, other interchanges that can be improved. And of course, we'll look at those. But in terms of bigger widenings or things like that, we're mainly looking at completing the HOV system throughout the region, including HOV lanes on the 405 and the 5 in this area. In terms of transit and passenger rail, we've got $50 billion region-wide for transit, and our definitions of transit and passenger rail are identical to what Don mentioned. Transit, we're talking about the bus system, bus rapid transit. We're talking about light rail and heavy rail in this region. On the passenger rail side, we've got $52 billion of investments, and this is for Metrolink. These are for improvements to the Los San corridor, and also for phase 1 of the California high-speed train system. And you can see that huge figure on the bottom for O&M for transit. We do need $140 billion to continue to operate our transit system here. And that figure actually not only includes continuing what we have today, but also enhancements to both the Metrolink service, as well as increasing service on existing bus lines throughout the region. That's significant because if you were to look at a map of rail transit, passenger rail transit in 1990, this is what it would have looked like. We had nothing on the ground in 1990. By today, this is what we've built. And of course, it's nowhere near enough, and by the year 2035, this is what we plan to have on the ground, according to the RTP SCS. In this area, we've got several bus rapid transit line extensions, as well as service enhancements that are working themselves through Metro. That's a multi-phased effort. The first few phases of that have actually already been implemented. A lot of extensions to the BRT lines here in the valley, and we've got a couple that are scheduled to come online in the next couple of years, all by 2020. Also, Don talked about enough of this already, the Metrolink Los San improvements, all the improvements that will come out of the Antelope Valley study, as well as phase 1 of California high-speed rail. These are all assumed in the RTP constraint plan as things that we will fund and will make to happen. Getting off of highways and transit, when we're talking about integrating land use and transportation and making better integrated decisions, TDM, transportation demand management, and active transportation becomes a really important strategy. These were almost afterthoughts in previous RTPs, but especially in this RTP with SB 375, we realized that if you can increase TDM strategies, if you can increase the use of active transportation in this region, active transportation being defined as non-motorized transportation, either biking or walking, we can take a lot of cars off the road. And so this RTP allocates $4 billion to TDM. We allocated about $2.5 billion last RTP. Active transportation, we allocated $2 billion last RTP. We've tripled that to $6 billion for this current RTP. And that money is going to go to increasing the mileage of bikeways in our region from 4,600 to 10,400. Once we get that on the ground, we'll be able to increase the percent of people in our region who live within a quarter mile of a bikeway from 42% to 62%. So it's all about accessibility and providing the opportunities for people to get on a bikeway, to get on a walkway, or be close to work where they can bike or walk, not only to work or recreation, but also to connecting transit. Goods movement is another huge strategy for our region. We're looking at, many of you have heard about the East-West Freight Corridor to get trucks more easily out of the ports into the inland ports. In this area, the major goods movement strategy is the GRACE operations, and that will benefit us not only in terms of arterial traffic and getting cars to have to stop a lot less frequently, but also improve our safety in the area, as well as get freight through the area quicker, resulting in air quality improvements as well. So in terms of land use, we've actually been doing integrated land use and transportation planning at SCAG for years now. We've had the Compass Blueprint demonstration projects, which we've only continued to to enhance as a result of SB 375 and the Green Push for Sustainability. That's really been a great project for not only SCAG, but all our member cities, because 100% of the money that we get from the feds, from the state for Compass Blueprint, we funnel to the cities. We do a call for projects, and cities tell us what they want to do, how they want to, how they want to study or implement local projects that bring transit closer to opportunities, work opportunities, residential opportunities. And so this RTP continues to emphasize that. So at the end of the day, I mentioned before, we've got $525 billion in investments. But this is probably our greatest challenge. I mean, we've got air quality, we've got mobility challenges, but at the end of the day, Southern California is smart enough to know how to fix these problems. The greatest challenge is how are we going to pay for the solutions that we've identified. And so, as a part of the RTP, the funding plan that we're required to develop for the feds to show that this RTP is a financially constrained plan includes these critical or major strategies. The first is that local option sales tax measures continue to remain a critical part of our region's funding plan. If we go back to the pie chart I just showed, you can see on the left side for the revenues, that biggest piece over there, 43% of this $524 billion is expected to come from core local revenues. These are our Measure R's, these are our sales tax measures. We've seen a decline in federal contribution into local transportation projects over the past few years. And so while we're not necessarily happy with that, and while I'm not suggesting that we should just deal with it, at the same time, we do need to recognize that that is the reality today, and we need to find some way to either pay for what we need or self-destruct, and those two options are pretty clear, I think. Another strategy is that we want to try to maximize our opportunities to leverage whatever we can, especially in terms of cash flow, to try to get projects done quicker. These are strategies such as 3010 that America Fast Forward, where we're trying to look at getting zero or low interest financing so that we can complete our projects sooner rather than later. We've got goods movement investments that we're trying as much as possible to get the private sector to pay for. Truck tolls to pay for the East-West Freight Corridor. We don't believe that projects that benefit both our residents as well as the goods movement companies should be paid solely by our taxpayers and by the public. So do whatever we can on that end. Of course, any strategic capacity expansion projects like the High Desert Corridor, like the 710 gap closure, or the Express Hot Lane Network, these are all going to involve toll lanes to some extent, only because we really are the days where we have an abundance of money from the feds to pay for freeways are long gone. Some of you may have heard about the mileage-based user fee that SCAG is proposing, and in some areas of the region, this causes an uproar. In other regions, in other areas, people are just simply upset, period. So we just want to explain quickly why we're proposing a mileage-based user fee, and I do need to give you a disclaimer that this is one idea, or one way of solving our financial challenges. This is not the only way. And if we ever get to something like this, it will be a result of you, of the local electeds in this region getting together and deciding that, you know what, this is what we want to pursue. If we find some other way in the next few years to implement some kind of reliable funding stream, then we go with that method. SCAG is not saying that, again, that this is the only way. But this is the challenge. Let me explain the challenge that we're trying to deal with and why, the background behind how we came up with this. Historically, the Federal Highway Trust Fund, which is where we get most of our money, our federal money, has been funded by the gas tax. And over the years, at critical points throughout history, 1983 and 1990 and 1993, this gas tax has been indexed, has been raised to match inflation. And so we've seen a gradual increase in these funds. But if you look into recent years, and we just blew up the last couple of decades, that bottom line is what we've been getting from the gas tax. And this is in terms of changes, so 100 means 100%. So basically, you can see that the gas tax has not really been adjusted enough to keep up with the top two lines, which are the middle line being our population growth, and the top line being our vehicle miles traveled. People just driving more and more people driving more. And so as a result, if we were to draw a fourth line, which is the purchasing power of the gas tax, that number would come down pretty much off the screen by the time you hit 2030. And so this is the predicament we're in. This is what we're trying to accomplish with a new reliable funding stream that we've been trying to figure out, what is the answer? But this is what the question is. The question is, we're getting less money from the feds, and we need to figure out how to make up for that. So, at the end of the day, these are the benefits that our model shows we'll be getting from the RTP. On the left side, you see our targets that we receive from the state, 8% greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2020 and 13% by 2035. We do meet our 2020 targets with this RTP SCS, and we exceed them by 3% in 2035. Yes?
This is for SCAG?
For the region. It's for SCAG. And on the federal side, we do meet our air quality conformity requirements, both fiscal constraint as well as the pollutant budgets that they assign to us. Of course, those are the regulatory benefits. What do the people care about? This is, I guess, what people care about a little bit more. The per capita delay is going to go down by 30% by 2035 as opposed to today's conditions. In terms of location efficiency, we will have over twice as many households live near high-quality transit opportunity areas as they do today as a result of our integrated land use and transportation planning, as a result of the transit extensions, as well as service enhancements. This RTP will also generate 168,000 jobs per year, which will equal to 4 million total by the year 2035. And as far as what I guess bang for the buck we get from this RTP, we'll get almost $3 back for every dollar we spend. So finally, these are our next steps for the RTP. As I mentioned before, the draft RTP SCS is out for public review, and it will be out, as Bob mentioned, until February the 14th. We'll also have a slew of meetings with our joint committees, as well as our regional council between now and when we expect them to adopt the RTP in early April. That has to happen. We can't miss that date because our transportation conformity approval from the feds from the last RTP expires on June 5th, and the feds typically take about 60 days to approve and certify the RTP. So just want to leave you finally with our website. We believe we're the first NPO in the country to come up with an interactive RTP website where members of the public or anybody can easily scroll through the RTP with our figures and charts and strategies. So we do invite you to visit our interactive website. You can also comment directly on the site, submit your comments there, so you don't have to mail them to us or anything like that. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. So.
I work with the GRID project, which is a zero emissions container loading, unloading, and movement to the Inland Empire project from the ports. Do you know if that's on SCAG's radar?
I don't know about the GRID project specifically. We did a multi-year goods movement study that recommended several $1 billion of goods movement strategies that are contained in this RTP. So maybe if we can talk afterwards, I can find out exactly what project you're talking about and check that for you. Sure. Yes, Alan?
I thought I heard you say that the Antelope Valley Line improvements are on the constrained project list.
Sorry?
And at the same, are the high-speed rail improvements on the constrained list too, or can you just amplify about what it says?
Yeah, let me clarify that, sorry. The Antelope Valley study that Don mentioned, that's the one I was referring to. Obviously, that study is still underway, so that hasn't resulted in specific improvements yet. What we assume is the funding, a general lump sum figure that would be used for the improvements that come out of that study. But as that study progresses and those projects are identified, then we would have to update the RTP to actually model those projects. So that's that piece. And then you also mentioned the high-speed rail. We do have the California system phase 1 from the county border to Anaheim in the constrained portion of the RTP. So we assume those two.
So can I make just one comment then? It's a little hard to understand with this MOU what parts of the high-speed rail phase 1 project could be assumed to be things that support the Antelope Valley Line.
You mean in terms of?
Well, there's overlap between the two of them. And you know, more specifically, if I were to ask on behalf of our client, the Bob Hope Airport Station, Would that be in the constrained list or the unconstrained list?
Well, basically, yeah, the Antelope Valley, or the improvements to Antelope Valley is part of the constrained plan. And then the California high-speed train shares the same alignment, you know, at least the same right-of-way. And it would be bypassing the airport in the same spot, so the phase one is in the constrained plan as well. So the two different pools of money would be applied towards both projects.
I haven't been to a SCAG meeting for some time, but the last time I went to one, the old maglev routes were still on all of your maps. Have they finally been removed?
Yes. Well, the SCAG proposed maglev system has been removed. Now, some of the alignments overlap some of the high-speed lines that we have in the RTP now, well, simply because they connect to a lot of the same cities. But the system itself, the SCAG proposal has been removed. I don't know if maybe Councilman Lee had some back to that.
Just, Alan, there is some interest and some talk about the Antelope Valley, or the northern corridor, being into the constrained plan simply because of the fact that other entities don't have the studies, they don't have the money, and yet they're in the constrained plan, but the northern corridor of the, not necessarily maglev, but the transportation corridor for the northern section is still in the strategic. I don't get that.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, so that's something that has happened recently. I think our high-speed rail subcommittee may be expected to take that up soon. Steve might have a little more.
The high-speed rail subcommittee?
Well, the high-speed rail subcommittee is finished, but the RTP subcommittee is still going on. And,
Yeah,
and you're referring to the northern corridor of the orange line.
Yeah.
Yeah, and right now the southern corridor is in the constrained plan, but the northern corridor is in the strategic plan.
Yeah,
But yeah, there has been some recent discussion that with the MOU and with the improvements along that northern corridor, that maybe that would be revisited for the orange line.
Okay, because we don't have, I'm not able to, I guess, sit on that RTP committee, and you know, we share with the city of San Fernando, and they're not there at the SCAG meetings. I'm hoping they'll show up this next time. So there's no representation for District 67 on the regional council right now. So I'm happy to hear you say that, but how do we get our voices heard?
Well, you can bring it up at the transportation committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Transportation Policy Committee is one.
Yeah.
67 is San Fernando.
San Fernando, Santa Clarita.
And there's no representation currently?
Well, we share it, and this is their 2 years, but unfortunately, they haven't been at the meetings, so.
I'll have to work on that, make sure they show up.
I have one question. I don't know if I can phrase the question correctly, but it was something brought up by former city manager Glendale, Jim Starver. Had to do with transfer of wealth and having to do with, I guess, the cap and trade perspective or element of how the whole greenhouse gas situation works. Is there built into this if you will, banking system, a cap and trade system that penalizes those who generate their energy through fossil fuels as opposed to those in Northern California who can generate theirs through maybe geothermal?
As far as I know, there's no penalization system for SB 375, period. I mean, even local.
There's no trading of
correct. Of greenhouse gas emissions.
So those who cannot meet the standards, how do they make those adjustments? Because not every city's in the same situation.
Right. Well, the law is applied to the region as a whole, not to the individual cities. And so, as long as SCAG can demonstrate that SCAG will meet the emission reductions, the state could actually care less which part of the region.
Then thinking on the larger scale, SCAG versus the Northern California interests,
right.
Is there any kind of a trade-off system there?
There is not.
No.
If you can't meet SB 375 and develop I'm sorry, you have to meet SB 375. But according to SB 375, if you can't meet the SCS, you can develop an APS, an alternative alternative planning scenario.
It's much like, it's much akin to the constrained plan versus the constrained plan.
Because when they first talked about it, it looked like they were working towards something like that, which would have been inequitable for people in Southern California.
I think that came up at the RTAC. It was one of the different strategies for what do you do if you can't meet the targets assigned to you. But ultimately, they didn't take any action.
I think the final word from SCAG was, we'll try.
It's
And that's what the APS.
It's usually our final word.
I have a question of time permits.
Sure, go ahead.
I understand the Gateway Cities Council of Governments and the Orange County Council of Governments develop their own sustainable community strategies to supplement the RTP. What would your advice be to our region in terms of that? What are the advantages?
Well, it's a bit late in the game to, go ahead, did you want to?
Yeah, the SES is that both subregions produced in Gateway and Orange County don't supplement their RTP. It's their growth forecast essentially for those subregions, so they're included in SCAG's overall assumption. The SB 375 itself asked all the subregions in the SCAG area exclusively in the law to consider if they wanted to take sub-regional delegation, and that was a number of years ago now in this process. So I guess the best way to do is as a group, as a sub-regional, to work with SCAG on a planning basis. Bob's already involved in the sub-regional planning group and the planning TAC, and bring some of those issues that are of concern to the sub-region as a whole, and make sure that we're accounting for those on the planning level.
In the slide on gap closures, didn't show, if I understand correctly, the 710 extension is included?
The 710 extension, north, the north section, like through South Pasadena.
Yeah.
That's that. Yeah, I'm sorry, Kevin, but it's actually that green line right there, right under that corner of the Fox versus I-5 HOV line. So it is
assumed that it's funded.
Yes.
In the $72 billion capital cost, 100%?
Yes.
Anything else? Another question? Thank you very much.
Bob, in those folders, I'm not sure if you want me to pass them out, but there's breakdowns of funding strategies and next steps and upcoming important dates that everybody might find
Don't leave without
useful.
one. Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to suggest that it's always nice to have a no longer than 90-minute meeting, A, and B, we have about 10 more minutes, and you might want to entertain discussion regarding where everybody can see this committee going, and what we'd like to do next steps, and how often we might want to meet.
That's an excellent suggestion, Mr. Scott. That's why we have you here.
I don't have the answers, I only have the questions.
Well, it was just thrown out to, the representatives here, yes.
I would just like to bring something up, and maybe as you are a new member sitting on the Transportation Committee representing this body, whether there should be any discussion at all regarding the MOU, the high-speed rail MOU. It's been brought up and mentioned a few times that there's really not a lot of teeth in that MOU, and that it doesn't really guarantee that the $1 billion is going to be allocated. They have until 2020 to do that. The city of Santa Clarita has written a letter, which was signed today, to Pam O'Connor and to the SCAG and to, I believe, it's some other agencies as well, regarding strengthening the MOU. A couple of simple things that could be done. Number one, that the MOU be revisited before the next SCAG RTP 2017 to make sure that they're on the road to allocating and committing those funds, and some sort of a matrix or a timeline for the projects that are going to be adopted to receive that $1 billion. Now, I know that 2020 in transportation speak is not a long period of time, because look how long it takes to get anything done. However, it can be revisited, I think, before the next RTP comes, to make sure that it's online. And so I was hoping that maybe this body would also suggest that happen as well.
No, take that as an agenda item to the COG.
Sure.
Did you want to say something?
Well, the thing
Yeah.
is they're talking about it on the 2nd. I mean, they're going to adopt it on the 2nd.
I've been pretty involved with this MOU.
Right.
It's been unfortunately, it's been a bed partner, it seems.
Mhm.
The MOU has had a lot of extensive writes and rewrites and what have you, and Metro has been at the forefront of this. And when I say I'm cautiously optimistic, it's a very real statement. The problem is, when we talk about funding timelines, to address your first point, it's very difficult at this time to determine funding timelines in the MOU. And the reason is because we're specifically targeting for a significant portion of this money, Proposition 1A. Proposition 1A is legislatively, allocated, so to speak. So it's hard for us to put that in this MOU at this point. I do like your idea, though, about revisiting it in 2017, and maybe we look at it, I don't know how we put that in the MOU, or if we need to put that in the MOU, but I do believe that holding that as our member agencies, holding that and doing that as a guideline to check on the progress. I would probably even go one step further. I would say that some core group work together as we move forward with these things, which they will at some point, to look at it from time to time and see how it's progressing anyway. The challenge that we have on this MOU is we do have $3 billion worth of projects on this MOU competing for $1 billion plus in funding from various sources. Out of those $3 billion in projects, not all of them qualify under Proposition 1A. So we're going to have to develop a strategy as we move forward with this that not only accounts for what qualifies under 1A, which is Phase 1 high-speed rail corridor, but also what could qualify as a feeder system and get additional funding from other sources. And that's what we're trying to work through with the High-Speed Rail Authority. So when you understand all those little nuances, you can understand some of the challenges that we have in putting this thing together. And I understand your concern about teeth. I too have felt the sting, okay? And I don't believe that there's any more way we could put any more teeth in this thing other than to move forward with this spirit of partnership with them and getting them to move forward with us in a spirit of partnership and making them accountable for their actions when they meet with cities such as yours and how they go forward. And I think it's up to us as agencies to monitor and really look after what's going on in our counties and in our cities versus the big picture so that we can keep them accountable. And I hope that answers some of your questions, some of it.
Well, it does, and yet when you read the MOU and you take a look at, on the resolution number 11 and 12, they can just say, forget you, within 30 days, and it's gone.
No, they cannot actually.
Really?
Yes, they cannot.
Okay.
No, remember, agency, the other parties, other than the High-Speed Rail Authority, can back out. The High-Speed Rail Authority cannot.
Where does it say that?
It says that in that clause. It says all parties except the High-Speed Rail Authority.
Okay, I'm gonna have to read that part.
I made it a point to put that in.
Okay, well, perhaps my copy is not the latest, maybe?
Yeah, and if it doesn't say that, because I wanted that in there, I was very clear about that. If it doesn't say that, by the time this is done, it will.
Okay, well, I will look at it again, but maybe I don't have the latest one. And it also, the thing is, if they aren't able to get the $1 billion by 2020, it's just okay.
If they can't get, but if they can't get the $1 billion by 2020, what are we going to do? You know, that's the source of their funding. That's the problem we have, in that they don't have a source of revenue and a source of funding other than what is decreed upon them by the state legislature per the law, per 1A. So if they don't get their funding, then we don't get the money.
Well, if they don't get their funding, then the whole thing goes away
Exactly.
anyway.
They don't have a project.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so it's, you're right, there's no teeth in that, there's nothing we can do about that. Unfortunately, we're helpless on that one, as are they.
So you don't think that the language to revisit it in 2017 could be in the MOU?
I don't think it does any good to be in the MOU. I think that's something that's our responsibility to make sure that we do. I think that's our responsibility as parties to this MOU and as the CEOs to work forward and make sure
The
that's
thing is, if it's not written down somewhere, everybody will forget.
Well, actually, as we start moving forward, there's a prioritization factor in this thing, and there's projects that are gonna be prioritized. And as we move along, we're gonna find that projects aren't gonna be ready, they're gonna have to drop out, and others are gonna have to move in. That's gonna be up to the CEOs to make sure that that works.
Yeah, 'cause just one other little thing, and I won't take any more time, it's just that unfortunately, the northern corridor is kind of just in passing, it's not on the list anywhere.
There's a double track project in Newhall to Santa Clarita, Silmar to Santa Clarita. And there's also one Newhall to Villa Present, or Newhall to Santa Clarita, I think there's a double track. There's double tracking in there. There's also work up in Palmdale that's in there. There's a double tracking in the Vincent grade separation. So there are projects up there.
Okay, there,
To answer your question, I think we can engage on this.
yeah, okay.
We don't need an official action to engage, we
Okay.
just will.
All right.
And you're welcome to call me.
Yeah, I heard you mention that, but I couldn't find it in the,
I'll
on the
give you
list.
my card.
I know, they get.
No, I'll give you my card. You can call me. No, we'll talk. I'd like to
Yeah,
talk with you
okay.
further about it. Give me a
I
call.
would love to know,
Right.
because I don't want to be, reaching out into the air.
No, I understand. I understand. I'll give you my card. We can talk about
Great.
it.
So the contact information you have out there is bogus?
No, that's right. That's right. But if you didn't write it down, I've got a card.
All right, it was a 3 instead of a 4.
That's right. I gave them Ann's number. Oh, Ann left. Oh.
Okay, so any other ideas or frequency of meetings, things like that? Yes.
And one other item for possible consideration for a future meeting, and that would be, and possibly, Councilwoman, McLean would like to champion this one, because it ties right into her last comment. Could this committee consider, positioning delegate to Northern Corridor cities projects into a constrained, plan, instead, as opposed to the strategic?
Sure.
You need a motion? No, I don't think we can do a motion here, but I would totally agree.
What, would it be
I think
possible?
Yeah, sure. Frame it out, and especially if the meeting is relatively soon. Back to the question, would you like to meet on a monthly basis, or every 45 days, or every 60 days? Or let's not make it every, let's just make it next. See what you do. It's your choice.
Whatever the consensus, I know we all have meetings after meetings after meetings. So every 2 months to,
I think it would be useful to follow up. I've got a lot more I'd like to talk to Mr. Sepulveda about, but time prevents us from going into some of that detail.
Just if I may, until the RTP is finished, and if we have concerns about RTP, perhaps a little more, another meeting or something before the final RTP, so we get our 2 cents in. And then after that,
so
then you
more
can go.
frequent up to that point? When is the RTP, what is that schedule?
Well, you got it.
Goes to comment, end of comment is February 14th.
Into public comment, but then what happens after that?
It goes to the response to comments period. It goes up to formal review and adoption by the regional council on April 4th and 5th.
So if we want to weigh in on the RTP with comment, we're going to have to get it in before the 14th, right?
That's the best time, yeah. Otherwise, you have to try to prevail.
Yeah.
Well, as a group, if you wanted to coordinate something among the cities and they all respond to or corresponding comments or something of that nature, or something from the COG itself, it'd have to be organized before the 14th.
So they have to take it back to the COG.
Well, not necessarily. If we can, if we have an urgent situation, maybe it didn't work out last time we tried, but we can always try again. It's eternal. We can present it, and if nobody objects, we can go forward.
I mean, we're already January 30th, talking February 14th.
Yeah.
It's 2 weeks, so should we meet tomorrow? I mean, okay, well.
You're the chair, so whatever you.
I'm here to listen to everybody, get
I think
everybody's
every
input.
city is going to, like, we are going to comment on it. I know Burbank is, I don't know, but I know La Cañada and many of the cities
And
are
if you
going
can
to.
share those comments, we might be
Sure.
able to put that into also a COG document that's
Yeah, we'd be happy to
amalgam.
include our letter to SCAG or send a copy to COG want to combine it, because each city may have a little different issue.
So we'll circulate a poll for a good date, and
Okay.
try to find when everybody can make it, and we'll try to collect all the comments from the jurisdictions, group them into a single document, present it, and have something ready to go by the 14th.
Great, sounds good.
Next meeting?
Next meeting? So that'll be a COG, you're talking about emergency meeting, but for the COG?
We don't have to have a meeting.
Okay.
For that, we can just go ahead and put it together, put it out for objection, and if there's no objection, we.
I don't want those COG members being upset with me.
I understand that. They already did.
Are you suggesting having another group, a meeting of this group?
Well, no, when would you like, on our agenda here is the transportation, we call it the transportation task force.
No, I was talking about the full COG, not necessarily this committee.
Right, well, and, you know, there may be a possibility that they want to have, I could talk to Chairman Najarian, and see if he'd like to have a meeting, we could have a special meeting.
There was a request from this committee to get the COG together and discuss it before the 14th, obviously.
Okay, we'll start with that.
All right. But as far as frequency of this committee, or task force, I'm not quite sure what we're naming it. We have committee and task force.
Okay.
2 months, month and a half, what's everybody's pleasure?
2 months sounds good, unless there's something comes up that it's, critical, we can always.
Okay.
All the transportation folks, we're always reviewing these documents and trying to keep up with it, so. We'll keep an eye on Don if we need to.
Yeah, you gotta keep an eye on Don.
We'll circulate that, if that creates a problem.
Any other subjects for next meeting? Anybody has anything they'd like to cover next meeting, which would be in 2 months or shorter, potentially, I guess. No, we'll keep looking.
If you have any ideas, make sure you're giving it to Mr. Scott.
Well, whatever positions any of the jurisdictions are taking, it'd be nice to get copies of some of those, so that we could move forward and try to get everybody on the same page. It always sounds better when there's a chorus than when there's just one voice sometimes, so.
Okay, that's it. No other business? All right, well, thank you very much for coming,
Thank you all.
and thank you for your input, thank you for the presentations, it was great, and we'll see you next time.
Information right here.